my name is Simon Braithwaite, and today I'm going to be talking to you about RAIQC, a clinical simulation platform for image interpretation. Simulation is now a well-recognised teaching method and has become commonplace in many specialties. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a new web-based clinical simulation tool for diagnostic imaging in the specialty of radiology. So, what is RAIQC? Well, it's the Report and Image Quality Control tool. As I mentioned, it's a web-based clinical simulation platform for medical image interpretation. It combines a zero-footprint DICOM viewer with structured reporting templates. The platform has a range of packages that deliver training and assessment to medical professionals. So, why RAIQC? Based at Oxford University Hospitals, the team behind RAIQC have many years of medical and technical expertise. This has ensured that the platform has been clinically validated and has governance approval within the NHS. We've inbuilt governance documents ready for adoption by organisations within and outside the NHS. Upon completion of our modules, users are able to download certificates to add to their personal development portfolios and review statistics in which they can compare themselves with peers. Today, I'd like to focus on the nasogastric module available on the RAIQC platform. But first, a bit of background. In a recent NHS improvement study, it was identified that 47% of NG-related incidents were due to X-ray misinterpretations, leading to never events. And a subsequent advice from the NHS improvement that all healthcare professionals involved with nasogastric tube position checks must be competently trained, including theoretical and practical learning. Now, I'd like to show you the training module. It's run on Google Slides and the user has the option to play through or click through at their own pace. Firstly, we introduce the importance of being able to interpret the NG tube position on a chest X-ray. We then go through and give the user a clear structure to help them have a plan for interpreting future films. We use a 4-point safety check. Does it pass through the middle of the chest? Does it bisect the carina? Does it cross the diaphragm in the midline? And is its tip clearly visible below the diaphragm? We go on to explain why each of these safety checks is very important. So, for example, if the NG is not bisecting the carina, it could indicate that it's lying within one of the bronchos. We do this for each of the safety checks to explain their importance and what the meaning could be if they're not meeting that safety check. We then go on to show some examples with the image on the right and to reiterate that structure on the left. In this case, it's incorrectly positioned. And the module shows the line of the NG tube and the fact that it doesn't pass through the chest, it doesn't bisect the carina, and it's not crossing the diaphragm, indicating that it could be within the right lung. Another example is shown here. In this one, the first two safety points are met. It does pass through the middle of the chest, it does bisect the carina, but it doesn't appear to be crossing the diaphragm, and its tip is not visible below the diaphragm, indicating that it's not been advanced far enough and it's sitting in the distal esophagus. So once the user's gone through this, there's a non-interactive quiz available where the user is shown the image and the structure again on the left. So for this picture, does it pass through the middle of the chest? Yes, it does. Does it bisect the carina? Yes, it does. Does it cross the diaphragm in the midline? Yep. And is the tip visible below the diaphragm? Yes, it is. So the user, having gone through all four of those, knows that the NG is safely positioned and it's a correct image. So the module will feed that back. They can then go on and again think about this one. Does it pass through the middle of the chest? It doesn't. Does it bisect the carina? No. Does it cross the diaphragm in the midline? Again, no. And is its tip visible below the diaphragm? No, it's not. So the module feeds back to say that all of these are incorrect and explains why. There are a number of these available and the user can click through them and get immediate feedback on their own thoughts. There's a mixture of correct and incorrect modules available, and the user has as long as they like to click through these examples. Once they've finished, they get a completion and they're ready to move on to the assessment module. The NG tube assessment module. There are 30 cases to complete in a time of 45 minutes. This is the home navigation screen. You can see I've already done 3 questions, and I'll come back to what those symbols mean later. So the user clicks on a case to review. The image appears on the left in the image viewer, and they have 2 questions to answer. 1, can they mark the location of the NG tube tip? And 2, is it safe to feed the patient, aka is the NG tube correctly positioned? Now, our image viewer enables the user to window the images to help them view things better. They can pan and they can zoom in on points of interest, for example, when they're looking for the NG tip. They can then select to mark the NG tip and decide whether it's safe to feed the patient or not. If they want to reset the image, they can just click reset. So in this case, they use the structure. Is it coming down the midline? Is it bisecting the carina? Is it crossing the diaphragm in the middle? And does it lie below the diaphragm? If so, they click yes and submit, answering that question. Now, if they're reviewing a case and they're not sure, they can either skip it, which comes up with a warning like this. Do you wish to remove any responses and continue to the next case? You press OK. They remove the responses that you put in. If you've answered some of it, for example, this is not safe to feed, but you're not sure where the tip is and you want to come back, you can mark a provisional report. This says that you save the data and continue to the next case. They continue doing this until they've completed all 30 cases or the time runs out. If they want to, they can click back and they can navigate through the cases they've done. So the green tick implies that they have answered both questions and moved on appropriately. Orange is the provisional reports, where they've put the data in but they aren't happy to sign it off as complete, and they can come back and review those. And red is the skipped reports, where they need to put in the data and reassess it. Again, they can come back to that at any point during the time. Once they've finished, they can press the complete module and next. Then they get the feedback that we'll look at next. After the user's completed the module, they're able to review their own statistics, including how long on average it took them to report a scan, how many they correctly reported, and then further information including how many tube tip locations they correctly identified, and how many were identified as safe to use correctly. They can then compare their results with peers in an anonymous feedback. So far, we've tested the tool at different institutes to assess the suitability and acceptability. We've tested it in over 200 users, viewing a total of 4,174 cases. The majority of users found it easy to use, and 83% of them agreed the tool was useful for their clinical practice. 67% would prefer more detailed feedback, particularly on each case. We believe that RAIQC is a useful platform with ease of use and a positive impact on practice. It's accessible by a range of medical professionals and can be used for mandatory training of NG tube position assessment, helping to prevent never events in the future. So, where do we go from here? Well, we've taken on board the comments we've received, and we're improving the detail of feedback that users receive. We're extending our packages to include fracture identification on plain films, which we hope to roll out in the coming months to medical students at the Oxford University Medical School. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact us via email at info@raiq.com or visit our platform raiq.com, where there are a number of modules for you to try.